Welcome to Ghostmire, where every night a new horror story drags you deeper than the last. Before anything else, hit subscribe right now. If you miss even one night, you'll miss the piece that connects all these stories into something far darker. Comment below where you're watching from and what time it is. I want to know exactly who's awake inside the dark with us. And listen carefully. This story has something hidden. A moment so disturbing, so unexpected that most people don't recognize it until the very end. If you leave early, you'll never know what really happened. So stay with me, all the way to the final second. 10 most disturbing true trucker cursed journey horror stories. Story 1. The repeating mile marker. Jake Thornton had been hauling refrigerated goods across I-80 for 12 years. And he prided himself on knowing every rest stop, every way station, every peculiar landmark between Sacramento and Salt Lake City. The route was second nature to him, programmed into his muscle memory as surely as breathing. On the night of November 14th, 2019, that familiarity became his nightmare. He left Sacramento at 9 p.m. with a load of frozen seafood bound for a distributor in Salt Lake. The weather was clear, traffic light, and his CB radio crackled with the usual banter between drivers. Around 1 a.m., somewhere in the Nevada desert between Winnemucca and Battle Mountain, Jake noticed mile marker 228. He remembered it specifically because the reflective paint formed an odd drip pattern that looked like a screaming face. He chuckled at the thought and kept driving. 10 minutes later, he passed mile marker 228 again. Same drip pattern, same screaming face. Jake checked his odometer. 3 miles since the first time he'd seen it. That was impossible. He keyed his CB radio. Anyone else on I-80 eastbound near Battle Mountain? Static answered him. Pure, empty static that seemed to pulse with its own rhythm. The highway stretched before him, perfectly straight, empty of other vehicles. His GPS showed him moving forward at 68 miles per hour. The dotted white lines blurred past in their hypnotic rhythm. 15 minutes later, mile marker 228 appeared again in his headlights. The screaming face seemed wider now, more pronounced. Jake's hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. He tried calling his dispatcher on his cell phone. No signal. That made no sense. He'd made calls from this exact stretch of highway hundreds of times. The temperature gauge on his reefer unit blinked. 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Normal. Everything appeared normal except for the impossible repetition of that single mile marker. Jake decided to stop at the next rest area, except no rest area came. According to his maps, there should have been one 15 miles past marker 228. He'd been driving for 40 minutes now, passing that same marker every 10 to 15 minutes. On the fourth pass, Jake noticed something new. A figure stood beside the mile marker. Tall, impossibly thin, wearing what looked like a dark uniform. As Jake's headlights swept across it, the figure raised one elongated arm and pointed west, back the way Jake had come. Jake pressed harder on the accelerator, pushing his rig to 75 miles per hour. The figure disappeared behind him. The fifth time he saw marker 228, there were 3 figures. They stood in a line, all pointing west, their faces hidden in shadow despite the brightness of his headlights. Jake's heart hammered against his ribs. Sweat soaked through his shirt despite the cool air from his AC. The CB radio began emitting a low, rhythmic tone. Da-da-da, dit-dit-dit, da-da-da. SOS in Morse code, repeating endlessly. Jake made a desperate decision. On the 6th approach to mile marker 228, he slammed on his brakes. The rig shuddered to a halt directly beside the marker. 7 figures now stood around it, forming a semicircle. They were closer than before, and Jake could see they wore uniforms from different eras. highway patrol from the 1950s, a trucker's outfit from the 1970s. Modern clothes, all of them pointed west with mechanical precision. He shifted into reverse. The transmission screamed in protest, but the truck began rolling backward. The figures turned their heads in unison, tracking his movement. As he reversed, passing the marker going west, their arms slowly lowered. Jake kept reversing for 2 miles, his neck twisted to see behind him, praying no other vehicle would appear. When he finally saw mile marker 226, he nearly sobbed with relief. He shifted back into drive and headed west, abandoning his delivery. As he passed through Battle Mountain going the opposite direction, everything returned to normal. His CB radio came alive with trucker chatter. His cell phone showed full bars. But when he tried to explain what happened to his dispatcher, he discovered something that made his blood run cold. According to every GPS log, every electronic record, every timestamp, he'd never gone east of Battle Mountain. His truck's computer showed him sitting stationary at a truck stop for 4 hours, though he'd never stopped. Jake never took a load east of Sacramento again. He sold his rig 3 months later and now works local deliveries, never driving at night, never taking interstate highways. He still has nightmares about mile marker 228, about those pointing figures. Sometimes when he's driving during the day on city streets, he'll glimpse a mile marker in his peripheral vision, and his heart will race until he verifies it's a different number. Any number but 228. The worst part came 6 months after the incident. Jake was browsing a trucker forum when he found a thread from 2007. A driver named Raymond Mills described being trapped in a loop on I-80, repeatedly passing the same mile marker while figures in old-fashioned clothes pointed west. The marker number? 228. Raymond posted that he'd finally escaped by reversing. No one ever heard from him again after that thread. His last delivery was logged as incomplete. His truck was found abandoned at a rest stop near Battle Mountain. Engine running, cargo intact, but Raymond Mills had vanished. Jake printed that forum thread and keeps it in his wallet. A reminder that some roads don't want you to travel them, that some stretches of highway exist in spaces between spaces where the normal rules stop applying. He wonders sometimes if he escaped at all, or if he's still there passing that marker for the 1,000th time, while some echo of himself lives out this half-life, forever avoiding the road that tried to claim him. On certain nights, when insomnia keeps him awake, he can still hear that Morse code pulsing through empty static, calling him back to mile marker 228. Story 2. The Cargo That Watched. Maria Castellanos had 15 years behind the wheel of her Kenworth T680, specializing in oversized loads and unusual cargo. She'd hauled everything from industrial machinery to decommissioned satellites, but the job she accepted on March 3, 2021, would be her last long-haul run. The pickup location was a warehouse outside of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and the delivery destination was a private research facility in Montana. The cargo was listed simply as medical equipment, with instructions to maintain a constant 65-degree temperature. The warehouse looked abandoned from the outside, its corrugated metal sides streaked with rust. A man in an expensive suit met Maria at the loading dock, which seemed oddly pristine compared to the building's exterior. He handed her paperwork with an unusual addendum. She was to avoid rest stops when possible, refuel only at specified locations, and under no circumstances should she open the cargo container during transport. The pay was triple her normal rate. Maria signed without asking questions. The cargo consisted of a single modified shipping container, matte black with no identifying marks. As the forklift loaded it onto her flatbed, Maria noticed the container had been fitted with additional ventilation systems and what looked like reinforced locking mechanisms far beyond standard security measures. The man in the suit watched until Maria had secured the load with chains and straps, then handed her a sealed envelope. "Open this only if you experience any difficulties," he said, his expression unreadable. For the first 8 hours, the run was routine. Maria drove through Louisiana into Arkansas as the sun set, painting the sky deep orange and purple. She stopped at a designated fuel station outside of Little Rock, a small independent operation that seemed prepared for her arrival. The attendant, an elderly man with clouded eyes, pumped her fuel without a word, never once looking at the cargo. As Maria pulled away, she glanced in her side mirror and saw the attendant standing motionless, watching her disappear into the darkness. Around midnight, somewhere in Missouri on a remote stretch of Highway 65, Maria heard the first sound. A rhythmic tapping, metal on metal, coming from inside the container. She keyed her CB radio to report it to dispatch, but received only static. The tapping continued, following a pattern: 3 slow taps, pause, 2 quick taps, pause, repeat. Maria tried to convince herself it was thermal expansion, metal contracting in the night air, but the pattern was too deliberate, too consistent. The tapping evolved into scratching, long, drawn-out scrapes against the interior walls of the container. Maria's eyes flicked constantly to her side mirrors, trying to see the cargo in the darkness behind her. Her truck's cargo lights illuminated the black container but revealed nothing. The temperature gauge for the climate control read exactly 65 degrees. Everything was functioning normally, except for the sounds that couldn't possibly be coming from medical equipment. Near the Iowa border, Maria pulled into one of the designated fuel stops, a truck stop that appeared on her instructions, but not on any GPS map. The parking lot contained 3 other semis, all with their lights off, all appearing abandoned. Maria filled her tank using the automated pump, her hand trembling as she swiped her fleet card. The scratching from the container had stopped, replaced by something worse. Silence. Complete, absolute silence that felt heavy and expectant. As she prepared to leave, Maria noticed something that made her stomach clench. There were scratch marks on the outside of the container now. Long, deep gouges in the black paint, revealing bare metal underneath. They hadn't been there when she'd loaded the cargo. The gouges formed patterns, almost like letters, but in no alphabet Maria recognized. She remembered the sealed envelope and ripped it open with shaking hands. Inside was a single page of instructions. If cargo becomes active, maintain speed above 60 mph. Do not stop for longer than 15 minutes. Do not investigate sounds. Deliver immediately to destination. Below this was a phone number with no area code. Maria dialed it. A woman's voice answered immediately, as if she'd been waiting. The voice asked. Maria told her, "Drive straight through, you have 14 hours." Maria drove. She drove through exhaustion, through the desperate need to sleep, through the growing terror that whatever was inside that container was becoming more active with each passing hour. The scratching returned, now accompanied by a low vibration she could feel through her seat. The container's climate control system began cycling on and off erratically, though the temperature reading never changed from 65 degrees. In Nebraska, as dawn broke over endless plains, Maria saw movement in her side mirror. The container's ventilation panels were flexing outward, as if something inside was pressing against them. She pressed the accelerator down, pushing her Kenworth to 75 miles per hour. The vibration intensified, becoming a bone-deep thrum that made her teeth ache and her vision blur at the edges. The sealed instructions had included specific directions for the final approach to the Montana facility. Maria was to call from a designated location 10 miles out, and the facility would open its gates for exactly 5 minutes. As she made the call, her voice hoarse from dehydration and fear, she noticed the container had gone completely still. No scratching, no vibration, nothing. just that oppressive, waiting silence. The facility appeared suddenly, a cluster of modern buildings behind a 15-foot chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Armed guards waited at the gate. They directed Maria to a loading dock where a team in hazmat suits immediately began disconnecting her cargo. No one spoke to her. No one made eye contact. A supervisor handed her a tablet to sign, releasing all liability, confirming delivery, and including a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement with penalties. Maria didn't bother reading. As she drove away, empty flatbed rattling behind her, Maria looked back once. The black container sat on the loading dock, surrounded by technicians in protective gear. For just a moment, she saw one of the ventilation panels bulge outward, saw something pale pressed against the mesh from inside, saw what might have been fingers. Then the facility gate closed and the scene disappeared from view. Maria sold her truck 2 weeks later. The triple payment sat in her bank account, untouched. She couldn't bring herself to spend it. She took a job as a dispatch coordinator, working from an office, never touching a steering wheel. But sometimes late at night, she hears that rhythmic tapping in her apartment. 3 slow taps, pause, 2 quick taps, pause. She knows it's impossible. The cargo is in Montana, secured in whatever facility houses such things. But the sound persists, and Maria has learned to sleep with headphones playing white noise, trying to drown out the pattern that followed her home. Story 3. The Ghost Convoy. Thomas "Tommy" Blackwell had been hauling timber through the Pacific Northwest for 23 years, and he thought he'd seen everything these mountains and forests could throw at him. Born and raised in Eugene, Oregon, Tommy knew the logging roads like the lines on his own palms. Every switchback and steep grade memorized through countless runs. The night of October 29, 2018 taught him that familiarity means nothing when the rules of reality decide to bend. Tommy was running late on a delivery from a logging site outside of Roseburg to a mill in Portland, a route he'd driven hundreds of times. Heavy fog had settled over the Cascade foothills, reducing visibility to maybe 30 feet, turning his headlights into useless cones of reflected white. He'd slowed to 40 miles per hour on Highway 58, his CB radio silent except for occasional bursts of static. The fog seemed to have swallowed the world, leaving only Tommy, his loaded truck, and the uncertain yellow lines of the road. At 2:47 a.m., Tommy crested a rise and saw taillights ahead. Red points of light hanging in the fog, moving at about the same speed he was, relief flooded through him. Another driver, another human being in this soup. He keyed his CB. "This is Timber Tom heading west on 58. Got a driver ahead of me." No response. Tommy tried again. Still nothing. The taillights continued ahead, steady and unchanging. Tommy closed the distance slightly, wanting to see the truck ahead more clearly. As he got closer, details emerged through the fog. It was a semi hauling logs, just like him. An older model, maybe from the 1980s based on the shape. The license plate was obscured by mud or fog. Tommy tried the CB again. "Hey there, driver ahead of me on 58. The static on the CB suddenly cleared and a voice crackled through. "Keep following. Stay in line." Before Tommy could respond, more taillights appeared ahead of the first truck. Another semi, also hauling logs. Then another and another. Within minutes, Tommy found himself as the 5th truck in a convoy of timber haulers. All moving through the field at exactly 40 miles per hour. The CB came alive with voices overlapping, distorted. Tommy's scalp prickled. Something about those voices wasn't right. They had a hollow quality, like they were echoing from far away. Tommy checked his GPS. According to the display, he was alone on the highway. No other vehicles detected. But he could clearly see 4 trucks ahead of him, their taillights sharp red points in the fog. He tried calling dispatch on his cell phone. No signal, even though this stretch of highway usually had decent coverage. The convoy continued, winding through the mountain passes, fog pressing in from all sides. Then Tommy noticed something that made his breath catch. The third truck in line, the one he could see most clearly, had damage to its rear doors. Significant damage, like it had been in a serious accident. The metal was crumpled, twisted, and through the gaps, Tommy could see the logs inside. But something was wrong with those logs. They were too dark, too irregular. As his headlights caught them at the right angle, Tommy realized they weren't logs at all. They were twisted shapes that resembled human forms, compressed and stacked. Tommy's hands locked on the steering wheel. He wanted to slow down, to let the convoy pull ahead, but his truck seemed to maintain speed automatically. The accelerator pedal pressed down under his foot with a will of its own. Panic clawed at his throat. He tried forcing the pedal up, but it wouldn't budge. His truck had become part of the convoy, and the convoy wouldn't let him go. The CB radio voices grew louder, more insistent. Tommy recognized one of the voices suddenly. It was Jack Morrison, a driver Tommy had known years ago. Jack had died in 2015, his truck going off a cliff during a foggy night on Highway 58. Tommy had been at the funeral. He'd helped carry the coffin. Yet Jack's voice crackled clear through the CB. "Welcome to the run, Tommy." Tommy's headlights illuminated the truck ahead more fully, and he saw writing on the back door. Tommy knew that company. They'd gone bankrupt in 1992 after losing 5 trucks and drivers in a series of accidents on this exact stretch of highway. Accidents caused by fog, by poor visibility, by drivers pushing too hard to make their deadlines. The trucks had all gone off the road at various points, tumbling down mountainsides, crushing their drivers in twisted metal and scattered logs. The convoy began to slow. Ahead, through breaks in the fog, Tommy could see a turnoff he didn't recognize. A dirt road leading into the forest, unmarked on any map. One by one, the trucks ahead of him took the turn, their taillights disappearing into the trees. Tommy's truck followed automatically, his steering wheel turning despite his attempts to straighten it. The dirt road was rough, barely wide enough for one truck, let alone 5. Branches scraped against Tommy's trailer, creating a sound like fingernails on metal. The road ended at a clearing where the fog seemed thicker, almost solid. The 4 trucks ahead had stopped, arranged in a semicircle. Their lights all faced inward, illuminating the center of the clearing where something stood. Tommy couldn't make out details through the fog and the overlapping shadows, but it was tall, impossibly tall, and it moved with a fluid motion that defied the shape Tommy's eyes tried to assign it. Tommy's truck stopped automatically, completing the semicircle. His engine died. All the engines died simultaneously, creating a silence so profound that Tommy's ears rang. The thing in the center of the clearing moved toward him. As it got closer, Tommy saw it was made of fog itself, shaped and given form by some force he couldn't comprehend. Within the fog were shapes, darker concentrations that might have been faces, reaching hands, bodies compressed and twisted like the cargo in the damaged truck. The driver's door of the truck directly across from Tommy opened. A figure climbed down, moving stiffly. It was Jack Morrison, or what was left of him. His body bore the damage from his fatal crash, bones bent at wrong angles, skin torn but walking nonetheless. Jack approached Tommy's truck, raised one shattered hand, and pointed back the way they'd come. "You can leave, Tommy." Jack's voice came through the CB, though his mouth didn't move. "You're not due yet, but you've seen us now. You know we're here. When your time comes, you'll join the convoy." Tommy's engine suddenly roared back to life. His truck lurched backward, controlled by forces beyond his understanding. He crashed through underbrush, his trailer swinging wildly until he felt pavement under his wheels again. Highway 58. The fog had lifted slightly and Tommy could see the road clearly now. His CB radio was silent. His cell phone showed full signal. His GPS indicated he'd never left the highway, that he'd been traveling west at a steady speed for the last 40 minutes with no deviation. Tommy completed his delivery to Portland in a daze. He told no one what he'd seen, knowing how it would sound. But he sold his truck within the month and took a job working the desk at a timber yard, coordinating shipments, never driving the routes himself. Tommy is 62 now. He started having dreams about fog, about taillights, about a dirt road that leads to a clearing. In the dreams, he's driving again, and ahead of him is the convoy, and he knows that this time, when he follows them off the highway, he won't be coming back. He wonders how many other drivers have seen the ghost convoy, how many know that Highway 58 claims its own, and that the timber haulers who died there are still making their runs, waiting for the fog to bring them company. Tommy keeps a photograph of Jack Morrison on his desk, a reminder that some roads demand payment, and eventually, that payment comes due. Story 4. The Backwards Mile. Dennis Walsh prided himself on precision. In his 19 years as an over-the-road trucker, he'd never missed a delivery window, never damaged cargo, and never received a single citation. He ran his routes with military precision, timing his fuel stops and rest breaks down to the minute. His truck was immaculate, his logbook perfect, his reputation sterling. On the night of January 8th, 2020, Dennis's obsession with order collided with something that existed outside of order, outside of logic, and outside of any physical law Dennis understood. He was hauling electronics from Dallas to Chicago, running I-35 north through Oklahoma. The night was clear and cold, stars sharp overhead, traffic light. Dennis had planned to push through to Kansas City before his mandatory rest period, arriving at exactly 4:30 a.m. at his preferred truck stop. At 11:17 p.m., Dennis passed a billboard advertising a steakhouse in Wichita, still 3 hours away. He noted the time in his mental log, adjusting his projected arrival by 30 seconds. At 11:18 p.m., Dennis passed the same billboard again. He glanced at his odometer, 2 miles since seeing it the first time. That was impossible. Dennis checked his mirrors, looked at the road signs. He was definitely traveling north on I-35. His speedometer showed a steady 68 miles per hour. His GPS confirmed his northward movement. Yet there was the billboard again, impossible to mistake with its cartoon cow and peeling paint. Dennis didn't panic. He was a logical man, and logical men don't panic. There had to be an explanation. Perhaps 2 identical billboards placed at regular intervals. Advertising companies did that sometimes. Except Dennis knew this stretch of highway intimately, and there was only one billboard for that Wichita steakhouse, located exactly 17 miles south of the Kansas border. At 11:19 p.m., the billboard appeared again. Dennis's hands tightened on the wheel. He checked his odometer. 2 miles traveled. His GPS showed continuous forward movement. The road stretched straight ahead, empty of other traffic, illuminated by his headlights and the occasional overhead light. Dennis tried his CB radio. Static. He tried his cell phone calling dispatch. The phone rang once, then disconnected. No signal, the display showed, though he'd had full bars a moment before. The 4th time he saw the billboard, Dennis noticed something new. The cartoon cow on the sign had changed position. In his initial sighting, it had been facing left. Now it faced right. Dennis blinked. Sure he was mistaken, but no. The cow definitely faced the opposite direction. At 11:21 p.m., the billboard appeared again. The cow faced left once more. But now the text had changed. Dennis's carefully maintained composure cracked. He pressed harder on the accelerator, pushing his truck to 75 miles per hour. The odometer spun forward. His GPS showed rapid movement north. Everything indicated he was speeding up, covering more ground. The cow's eyes seemed to follow his truck as he passed. Dennis made a split-second decision. He slammed on his brakes, bringing his 40-ton rig to a shuddering stop in the right lane. He sat there, engine idling, breathing hard. His clock read 11:23 p.m. Dennis stared at the road ahead, waiting. After exactly 1 minute, he saw headlights approaching from behind. A semi, moving at highway speed, passed him on the left. Dennis caught a glimpse of the driver, a man who looked exactly like him. Same face, same expression, same white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel. The truck disappeared into the distance ahead. Dennis's blood turned to ice. He looked at his dashboard. His odometer read 278,439 miles. He'd noted the reading when he'd left Dallas, 278,421 miles. He'd traveled only 18 miles in 2 hours of driving. The math was impossible. Dennis grabbed his logbook, flipping to the current page. His own handwriting stared back at him, but the entries made no sense. The same time notations repeated over and over. 11:17, 11:18, 11:19, 11:20, 11:21, 11:22, 11:23, then starting over at 11:17 again. Pages and pages of repeated timestamps. Dennis put his truck in gear and slowly accelerated. He drove carefully now, watching his odometer click forward. 1/10 of a mile, 2/10, 3/10. At exactly 1 mile, he saw the billboard. "Welcome to the Loop," it read. The cow was gone entirely, replaced by a simple arrow pointing straight ahead. Dennis's mind raced, trying to find the logical explanation he always relied on. There wasn't one. He was caught in something impossible, something his precise, ordered worldview couldn't accommodate. He tried driving backward, shifting into reverse and carefully backing up along the empty highway. 2 miles according to the odometer. Then he saw the billboard ahead of him again. Impossible because he was moving away from it. Dennis shifted back into drive, his breathing shallow, sweat soaking through his shirt despite the cold night air. At 11:30 p.m., exactly 13 minutes after entering whatever this was, something changed. Dennis saw a car on the side of the road ahead, a sedan with its flashers on, hood raised, a figure standing beside it waving for help. Every instinct Dennis had screamed at him not to stop. But he was a decent man, and decent men help stranded motorists. He pulled his truck over behind the sedan. The figure approached his window. It was a woman in business attire, completely inappropriate for a January night in Oklahoma. She smiled up at him, and Dennis saw that her eyes reflected his headlights like an animal's. "You've been driving the same mile for 13 minutes, she said, her voice pleasant and conversational. Dennis couldn't speak. "Because you counted," she continued. "You counted every mile, every minute, every second of every trip. You reduced the journey to numbers, to precision, to control. This mile is all the miles you never really saw. All the moments you reduced to data points. You have to see it now." The woman gestured to the landscape around them. For the first time since entering the loop, Dennis actually looked at his surroundings rather than just processing them as route information. He saw details he'd missed in 19 years of driving this highway. A farmhouse in the distance with a light in one window, suggesting lives being lived. A grove of trees bent by prevailing winds, shaped by years of growth. A small roadside memorial for someone who died here, flowers tied to a white cross. The landscape wasn't just pavement and mile markers. It was real, lived in, full of stories Dennis had never bothered to notice. "Now drive," the woman said. She walked back to her sedan, got in, and drove away. The car accelerated to impossible speeds and disappeared in seconds. Dennis sat in his truck, trembling. He put it in gear and pressed the accelerator. This time, as he drove, he looked at everything. He noted the texture of the pavement, the way his headlights caught reflective markers, the subtle variations in the landscape. He stopped counting, stopped timing, just drove. At 11:44 p.m., Dennis saw a new billboard. It advertised a truck stop in Emporia, Kansas, 50 miles ahead. He'd broken out of the loop. His odometer now read correctly, his GPS showed proper movement, and his CB radio crackled with normal trucker chatter. Dennis drove to Emporia and stopped for the night, 4 hours ahead of his planned rest break. He sat in his sleeper cab, unable to sleep, staring at his logbook. The repeated time entries were gone, replaced by normal notations, but Dennis remembered them. He completed his delivery to Chicago the next day, but something fundamental had changed in Dennis Walsh. He still drove precisely, still maintained his truck immaculately, still met his delivery windows. But now he saw the road as more than numbers and waypoints. He noticed things. He stopped at roadside memorials sometimes, paying respect to drivers who died. He helped stranded motorists without calculating the delay it would cause. He looked at the landscapes he drove through, really looked at them. Dennis never drove that particular stretch of I-35 at night again if he could help it. When he had to, he kept his eyes open for the billboard with the cartoon cow, but it never appeared for him again. Sometimes, though, he'd see other drivers on the highway, their faces locked in concentration, their grip white-knuckled, their eyes seeing nothing but the road ahead. Dennis wondered if they were in their own loops, trapped in their own backwards miles, and if they'd ever find their way out. 2 miles forever, watching time repeat, never reaching their destinations. Dennis had escaped because he'd learned to see. Not everyone, he suspected, was that fortunate. Story 5. The Empty Fuel Gauge. Rebecca "Becca" Torres specialized in middle-of-the-night runs across the Texas Panhandle, a route most drivers avoided due to its isolation and the mind-numbing monotony of endless flat terrain. Becca loved it precisely for those reasons. The solitude gave her time to think, to plan, to exist without the chaos of crowded highways and truck stop politics. She'd been running the route between Amarillo and Albuquerque for 7 years, knew every fuel stop, every quirk of the road. On May 12, 2019, Becca's fuel gauge read empty for 340 miles, and she learned that some journeys operate on different rules than physics and logic. Becca left Amarillo at 10 p.m. with a full load of agricultural equipment bound for Albuquerque. She'd topped off her twin 150-gallon fuel tanks at the Flying J, enough diesel to make the trip with fuel to spare. 5 miles per gallon. The 290-mile journey should have consumed about 45 gallons, leaving her with over 250 gallons remaining. Becca prided herself on fuel economy and careful planning. She'd never run low, never had to call for emergency fuel delivery. About 40 miles west of Amarillo on I-40, Becca glanced at her fuel gauge. The needle pointed to E. Both tanks read completely empty. That was impossible. She'd fueled up less than an hour ago, traveled only 40 miles. Becca tapped the gauge, assuming it had malfunctioned. The needle didn't move. She checked her engine diagnostics on the dashboard display. The computer agreed with the gauge. 0% fuel remaining in both tanks. Becca's first instinct was to pull over immediately, but the engine ran smoothly with no indication of fuel starvation. She could hear the diesel engine's steady rumble, feel its power responding normally to the accelerator. If both tanks were truly empty, her engine would be sputtering, dying. Instead, it purred along perfectly. Becca decided to keep driving to the next fuel stop, a Love's Travel stop about 20 miles ahead in Glen Rio, right on the Texas-New Mexico border. She made it to Glen Rio. The fuel gauge still read empty. Becca pulled up to the diesel pumps, shut down her engine, and tried to fuel up. The pump handle wouldn't fit into her tank's fill pipe. That made no sense at all. Becca examined the connection. The fuel nozzle was standard, her tank's opening was standard, but when she tried to insert the nozzle, it stopped as if the opening were too small or blocked. She tried the other tank, same result. It was like trying to fit incompatible pieces of a puzzle together. The fuel station attendant, a weathered man in his 60s, walked out to help. He examined the setup, scratched his head, and tried the fuel nozzle himself. "Never seen anything like this," he muttered. He looked at Becca with an expression that made her uncomfortable, something like recognition mixed with sympathy. "You best keep driving," he said quietly. Don't stop again." Becca wanted to argue, to demand an explanation, but something in the man's tone made her comply. She climbed back into her truck, started the engine on the first try despite the gauge reading empty, and pulled back onto I-40. The attendant watched her go, standing motionless under the harsh fluorescent lights of the fuel island. In her mirror, Becca saw him make a small sign of the cross before turning away. Miles accumulated: 50, 75, 100. Becca's fuel gauge never moved from empty. Her engine continued running perfectly. She passed through Tucumcari, New Mexico, passed through Santa Rosa. Every fuel stop she saw, she felt an overwhelming urge to pull in, to try again to fill her tanks, but the attendant's words echoed in her mind. "Don't stop again, just drive straight through." Around 2 a.m., Becca noticed something else wrong. Her odometer had stopped advancing. It was frozen at 87,543 miles, the reading it had shown when she'd left the fuel stop in Glen Rio. Yet her GPS showed her position updating normally, moving west along I-40, approaching Albuquerque. She was covering distance without accumulating miles, consuming fuel without depleting her tanks, operating under rules that defied every law of physics she understood. Becca tried her CB radio for the first time since noticing the fuel problem. "Anyone on I-40 westbound, this is Lone Star Transport." A voice responded immediately, crystal clear with no static. "We're all out here, Becca. Everyone who kept driving on empty." The voice was female, young, unfamiliar. Becca asked, her mouth dry. "We know all the names, we see all the trucks." Becca's hands shook on the wheel. Silence answered her. She tried the CB again. Different voices responded, overlapping, some male, some female, all tinged with static now. That last instruction stood out: "Make it to sunrise." Becca checked the time. 2:14 a.m. Sunrise wouldn't come for another 4 hours. The landscape outside her windows began to change in subtle ways. The flat Texas panhandle terrain should have given way to the more varied topography of New Mexico, but instead, everything looked the same. Mile after mile of identical terrain, as if she were driving through a loop of repeated scenery. Becca rubbed her eyes, wondering if exhaustion was causing hallucinations, but no. She'd gotten solid sleep before this run. She wasn't tired. She was driving through something impossible, something that wore the appearance of a normal highway, but operated under different rules. Around 3 a.m., Becca saw another truck ahead of her, the first vehicle she'd seen in hours. It was a semi similar to hers, hauling a covered load, running at about the same speed. Becca closed the distance, hoping to see another driver to confirm she wasn't alone in whatever this was. As she got closer, she noticed the other truck looked old, faded, like it had been abandoned for years. The trailer was covered in rust, one taillight was out, and the license plate was too degraded to read. The other truck's driver's side mirror reflected Becca's headlights, and she caught a glimpse of the driver. It was a woman, middle-aged, with long, dark hair. The woman raised her hand in greeting, and Becca waved back automatically. Then the other truck began to slow down. It decelerated rapidly, falling back alongside Becca's driver's window. Becca glanced over and immediately wished she hadn't. The woman's face was hollow, sunken, like she'd been dehydrated for weeks. Her eyes were dark pits and her mouth moved, forming words Becca couldn't hear over her engine noise. Becca pressed her accelerator down, pulling ahead of the strange truck. In her mirror, she watched it fade back into the darkness behind her. Her heart hammered. She checked her fuel gauge again by reflex. Still empty, still impossible. The clock on her dashboard read 3:27 a.m. 2.5 hours until sunrise. Keep driving, don't stop, make it to sunrise. The CB radio crackled again. A male voice this time, calm and almost fatherly. Most don't make it this far. They stop, they try to fight it, they try to make sense of it. You just kept driving. That's the key, Becca demanded. From the fuel-less run, the road between, the highway that doesn't exist on any map. Every trucker fears it. Some of us end up here. At 4:15 a.m., Becca's truck passed a sign welcoming her to Albuquerque. Her GPS confirmed her location. According to every indicator, she'd reached her destination. But the landscape around her was still that endless, flat, featureless terrain that should have ended hours ago. The city lights she expected to see weren't there, just darkness broken occasionally by her headlights catching road signs that listed familiar exit numbers for a city that wasn't visible. Becca kept driving. Through Albuquerque that wasn't there, west, toward Arizona. Her delivery destination didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was sunrise. At 5:42 a.m., the eastern sky began to lighten. Gray at first, then pink, then orange. Becca's eyes burned with tears of relief. She'd never been so grateful to see dawn coming. As the first direct rays of sunlight hit her windshield at 6:08 a.m., everything changed. Becca blinked, and suddenly she was pulling into the delivery location in Albuquerque. Her GPS showed her in the correct location. Her odometer read 87,033 miles, exactly the mileage she should have accumulated from Amarillo. And her fuel gauge read 3/4 full, a perfectly normal reading for the distance she'd traveled. It was as if the previous 8 hours had been rewritten to match reality. Becca completed her delivery in a daze. The workers at the warehouse noticed nothing unusual, chatted with her about normal things, signed the paperwork. Becca drove to a nearby truck stop and parked. She sat in her cab for 2 hours staring at her fuel gauge, watching the needle rest steadily at its proper level. When she finally called her dispatcher to report the successful delivery, she said nothing about the night's events. What could she say that wouldn't sound like madness? Becca still runs the Amarillo to Albuquerque route. She always fuels up completely before leaving, always checks her gauge obsessively during the drive. Most nights are normal, but twice since that May night in 2019, her fuel gauge has dropped to empty within the first hour of driving. Both times, Becca remembered the attendant's advice and the voices on the CB. She kept driving, didn't stop, just focused on reaching sunrise. Both times, as dawn broke, everything returned to normal. Becca doesn't talk about the fuel-less runs with other drivers. She knows how it sounds. But she started noticing things. Other drivers at fuel stops who look exhausted beyond reason, who stare at their fuel gauges with haunted expressions, who pump fuel with trembling hands. She wonders if they've driven the road between, if they've made it to sunrise, or if they're still out there somewhere, driving on empty through an endless night that never gives way to dawn. She hopes she never finds out for certain, but she knows that every time she takes that route, there's a chance she'll slip back into that other highway, where fuel gauges lie and distance has no meaning, and the only way to survive is to keep driving until the sun comes up. Story 6. The Hitchhiker Who Wasn't There. Carl Dietrich had a strict no-hitchhiker policy, a rule he'd maintained through 31 years of over-the-road trucking. He'd heard too many horror stories, seen too many scams, knew better than to pick up strangers regardless of weather or circumstance. Carl's rule had kept him safe through 3 decades of night driving across America's loneliest roads. On the night of August 16, 2017, Carl's policy didn't matter at all, because the hitchhiker got into his truck without him stopping, without him agreeing, without the door ever opening. Carl was hauling furniture from Charlotte, North Carolina to Indianapolis, running I-77 north through the Appalachian foothills. The night was warm and humid, with heat lightning flickering in distant clouds. Traffic was light, just a few cars and the occasional semi. Carl had been driving for 6 hours, was planning to push through to a truck stop near Charleston, West Virginia for his rest break. His CB radio played softly, background chatter from other drivers, familiar and comforting. At 1:33 a.m., somewhere between Fancy Gap and Hillsville, Virginia, Carl became aware of a presence in his passenger seat. Not through sound or movement, but through a sudden, bone-deep certainty that he was no longer alone in the cab. Carl's head snapped to the right. A man sat in the passenger seat wearing a faded denim jacket and jeans, maybe 35 years old, with dark hair and an ordinary, forgettable face. The man stared straight ahead through the windshield, expression neutral. Carl's heart lurched. He'd locked his doors at his last stop. The passenger door hadn't opened. He would have heard it, felt the change in air pressure, something. Yet here was this man, sitting calmly as if he'd been there all along. Carl's first instinct was to slam on the brakes and order the intruder out, but something stopped him. The man's stillness, his complete lack of threat or aggression. He just sat there, watching the road, breathing so quietly Carl couldn't hear it over the engine noise. Carl demanded, his voice harder than he felt. The hitchhiker didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge that Carl had spoken. He continued staring forward, hands folded in his lap. Carl reached for his CB radio. The moment his finger pressed the transmit button, the hitchhiker turned to look at him. The man's eyes were completely black. Not dark brown or shadowed, but absolutely impossibly black, like looking into deep wells with no bottom. Carl's hand froze on the radio. The hitchhiker shook his head slowly, a gesture of negation, then turned back to face forward. Carl's voice died in his throat. He released the radio transmit button. The CB fell silent, and Carl became aware that all the background chatter had stopped. No other drivers talking, no static, just dead air. Carl's mind raced through options. He could pull over, jump out of the truck, run. But something told him that running wouldn't matter. This wasn't a normal hitchhiker, not a human who'd managed some trick to get into a locked truck. This was something else entirely. Carl's hands stayed on the wheel, maintaining speed, continuing north. If the hitchhiker wanted to harm him, Carl reasoned, it would have already happened. So what did it want? Carl asked, forcing his voice steady. For a long moment, the hitchhiker didn't respond. Then, without moving his lips, a voice filled Carl's head. Not heard through his ears, but present directly in his mind. "The same place you are." The voice was emotionless, stating a simple fact. Carl's skin crawled. "I'm going to Indianapolis," he said, knowing it was a meaningless answer. "No," the voice in his head replied. "You're going forward, always forward, never arriving." Carl checked his mirrors reflexively, a driver's instinct. In the passenger side mirror, the seat appeared empty. No hitchhiker reflected there. Carl's eyes snapped back to the seat itself. The man sat there, solid and present, but the mirror showed only empty space. Carl's breath came faster. He was sharing his cab with something that cast no reflection, something that could speak directly into his thoughts. Carl whispered. The hitchhiker tilted his head, considering the question. I'm the passenger. I've been riding with drivers since there were drivers. Before trucks, I rode in wagons. Before wagons, I walked alongside travelers. I'm the companion on the journey. Carl's mouth went dry. The hitchhiker made a sound that might have been a laugh. Simpler than that, just miles passed. 10, 20, 30. The hitchhiker sat motionless, occasionally turning his black eyes toward Carl, more often just watching the road. Carl drove on autopilot, his mind struggling to process the impossibility beside him. Other vehicles passed occasionally, and Carl wondered if their drivers could see his passenger. He suspected not. This encounter was his alone. Around 2:45 a.m., the hitchhiker spoke again, that voice resonating directly in Carl's mind. You've driven for 31 years, 768,000 miles. You've seen 43 states. You've delivered thousands of loads. You know every major highway, every truck stop, every way station. You've reduced America to a series of routes, waypoints, delivery schedules. But you've never really gone anywhere. Carl wanted to argue, to defend his career, his life, but the words felt hollow before he could speak them. He thought about his ex-wife, divorced 15 years ago because he was never home. His daughter, now 26, who he barely knew because he'd been on the road during her childhood. His apartment in Charlotte, which was really just a place to store his belongings between trips. The hitchhiker was right. Carl had been driving for 3 decades, covering the country, yet he'd never really gone anywhere that mattered. Carl asked, his voice cracking. I want you to understand, the hitchhiker replied. I want you to see what you've been doing. I ride with drivers who need to see. Some understand, others don't. Those who don't, they keep driving. Carl's blood went cold. The hitchhiker gestured vaguely. They become like you, going forward, never arriving. Carl thought about the ghost convoy Tommy Blackwell had encountered, about the loops and impossibilities other drivers whispered about at truck stops, stories he'd dismissed as exhaustion-induced hallucinations or tall tales. Now he wondered if those drivers had met the hitchhiker, if they'd failed some test Carl was currently taking. Carl asked desperately. Arrive, the hitchhiker said simply. Really arrive. Not at Indianapolis or Charlotte or any delivery location. Arrive at yourself, at the life you've been driving past. The hitchhiker turned his black-eyed gaze fully on Carl. Your daughter lives in Asheville. That's 43 miles from Charlotte. How many times have you driven past that exit without taking it? Carl felt tears burning his eyes. I didn't know how to be a father and a driver. You chose motion over meaning, the hitchhiker corrected. You chose the road over the destination. Now you have a choice again. Take the next exit, go back, see your daughter, start arriving at your life. Ahead, Carl saw an exit sign for Hillsville. He could take it, turn around, head back south to Charlotte, and then to Asheville. He'd miss his delivery window. His dispatcher would be furious. His perfect record would be tarnished. But he'd arrive somewhere that mattered, for the first time in 31 years. Carl's hand hovered over the turn signal. The hitchhiker watched him, black eyes reflecting no light. Choose, the voice commanded in Carl's head. Carl flipped on his turn signal and took the exit. His truck descended the ramp, leaving I-77 behind. The moment his wheels touched the exit ramp pavement, the hitchhiker vanished, completely, instantly gone, as if he'd never been there. The passenger seat was empty, and in Carl's mirror, it had always been empty. Carl pulled into a gas station at the bottom of the exit ramp and sat shaking for 10 minutes. Then he called his dispatcher, explained he had a family emergency, and turned his truck around. He drove back to Charlotte, dropped his trailer at the terminal, and continued to Asheville in his tractor alone. He showed up at his daughter's apartment at 7 a.m. with no warning, no call ahead. She answered the door in her bathrobe, shocked to see him. Carl broke down crying on her doorstep, unable to explain why he was there, only that he needed to be. Carl quit long-haul trucking 2 months later. He took a local delivery job based in Charlotte, home every night. He started having dinner with his daughter once a week. He learned about her life, her career as a veterinary tech, her struggles and triumphs. He started arriving at things that mattered, at places that were destinations rather than just stops along an endless route. Carl never saw the hitchhiker again, but he thinks about him every time he passes an exit. He wonders how many other drivers are sharing their cabs with that black-eyed passenger, receiving the same choice. He wonders how many take the exit, and how many keep driving forward, choosing motion over meaning, until they become part of the ghost stories Carl used to dismiss. Sometimes late at night, Carl hears his old CB radio in his garage, turned off but somehow producing that familiar static. And in that static, he swears he can hear voices. Drivers calling for help, reporting their positions, maintaining their forward momentum on highways that exist between reality and nightmare. Carl is grateful he's not among them, grateful he learned to arrive before it was too late. Story 7. The Static Voice. Lauren Vasquez had been running dedicated routes for a pharmaceutical company for 8 years, transporting temperature-controlled medications between distribution centers across the Southwest. Her routes were predictable, her cargo valuable, and her equipment top of the line. Lauren's truck was equipped with the latest technology: GPS tracking, electronic logging, climate control monitoring, and a state-of-the-art communication system that kept her connected to dispatch at all times. On February 23, 2021, that communication system began receiving messages that shouldn't have existed, from a source Lauren would never identify. Lauren was hauling a load of insulin and other temperature-sensitive medications from Phoenix to El Paso, a route she'd driven 2 or 3 times a month for years. She left Phoenix at 10 p.m., her refrigerated trailer set to a precisely controlled 38 degrees Fahrenheit. The night was clear and cold, with temperatures in the low 40s, perfect driving conditions. Lauren settled into her route, heading east on I-10, expecting a smooth, uneventful run. About an hour outside of Phoenix, near the town of Benson, Arizona, Lauren's radio crackled to life. Not her CB radio, but the company's digital communication system that connected her directly to dispatch. A voice came through, male, speaking clearly but with an undercurrent of static that sounded almost organic, like breathing. Lauren Vasquez, pharmaceutical transport eastbound on I-10. Be advised, you are approaching a decision point. Time and distance will compress to... Lauren grabbed the radio handset. Dispatch, this is Transport 7. What was that message? She released the transmit button and waited. Normal dispatch procedures followed specific protocols, clear communication confirming messages. Instead, that same static-laden voice responded. This is not dispatch, Lauren. This is something else. This is the voice that speaks when the highway opens up and shows you what lies beneath the pavement. You're about to enter a stretch where the normal rules don't apply. Lauren's professional demeanor cracked. Who is this? This is a private company channel. The static increased, forming patterns that almost sounded like laughter. No prank, no joke. I'm the voice that reaches drivers when they're between spaces, between moments. Some hear me and listen, others ignore me and get lost. There's a rest area 23 miles ahead. You need to stop there. You need to wait until sunrise before continuing. Lauren checked her GPS. There was indeed a rest area 23 miles ahead, a standard Arizona Department of Transportation facility she'd stopped at before. She demanded. The static voice took its time answering. Because tonight, the road east of that rest area isn't connected to El Paso anymore. It's connected to somewhere else. Somewhere that looks like I-10, feels like I-10, but leads to places that aren't on any map. Stop at the rest area. Wait for sunrise. Lauren's hands tightened on the wheel. This had to be a prank, some hacker who'd gotten into the company's radio frequency, or maybe a malfunction creating phantom signals. But something about the voice's certainty made her uneasy. She'd heard stories about drivers experiencing impossible things on certain routes. She'd always dismissed those stories as exhaustion or exaggeration. Now one of those impossible things was happening to her. "I have temperature-controlled cargo," Lauren said. "I have a delivery window." The static voice sighed, a sound like wind through empty spaces. "Your cargo will be fine. Your delivery window doesn't matter if you never reach El Paso. Trust me, Lauren, or don't. Your choice. But I've made this call before, and the drivers who ignored it didn't arrive at their destinations. They arrived somewhere else." Lauren approached the rest area, her mind racing. Every logical bone in her body said to ignore the voice, to continue to El Paso, to maintain her schedule. But a deeper instinct, the same instinct that had kept her safe through 8 years of night driving, told her to listen. She took the exit to the rest area, her truck climbing the off-ramp. The moment she left the interstate, her radio went silent. The static voice cut off mid-sentence, leaving only normal background noise. The rest area was empty. No other trucks, no cars, just pools of yellow light from overhead lamps and the dark shapes of restrooms and picnic tables. Lauren parked her truck, kept the engine running to maintain trailer temperature, and sat in her cab trying to decide if she'd just made a massive mistake. She called dispatch on her cell phone to report the delay. Normal dispatch answered, had no record of any radio communications to her truck in the last 2 hours, and instructed her to continue to El Paso as soon as possible. Lauren sat there for 15 minutes, feeling foolish, preparing to restart her drive. Then she noticed another truck entering the rest area. A semi, hauling a covered trailer, pulled in and parked 3 spaces away from her. The driver climbed down, a man in his 50s with gray hair and a tired face. He walked toward the restrooms, passing Lauren's truck. Their eyes met, and the man's expression changed from neutral exhaustion to shock. He altered his path and approached Lauren's window. Lauren rolled it down. "Evening?" she said cautiously. The man stared at her truck like he was seeing a ghost. He asked, his voice hoarse. Lauren blinked. He repeated urgently, 2021, Lauren answered. The man staggered backward, grabbed the side mirror of his truck for support. "I've been driving for 3 days, he said. 3 days on I-10 heading east. It's been night the whole time. I thought I was losing my mind. I stopped here hoping to find help." Lauren felt ice forming in her stomach. "Tucson, 3 days ago, February 20th. The man looked at his own truck as if seeing it for the first time. "I kept passing the same landmarks, the same mile markers. I tried exiting, but every exit led back to I-10. I tried turning around, but west became east. The sun never came up." Lauren's radio crackled back to life. The static voice returned. "You see, Lauren? This is what happens when drivers don't stop. This man has been looping on the disconnected highway for 3 days. He's lucky. Some drivers loop for weeks, months." Lauren grabbed her radio handset. "How do we fix this?" "He's already back," the static voice answered. "The rest area is the anchor point. It exists in both spaces simultaneously. He found it, he escaped. But if he drives east again tonight, he'll slip right back into the loop. Same as you would have, Lauren, if you'd ignored my warning. Both of you need to wait here until sunrise. That's when the highway reconnects properly." The gray-haired driver could hear the voice through Lauren's external speakers. He stumbled to his own truck, grabbed his CB radio handset, and called out, "Who are you?" The static voice answered through both trucks' radios simultaneously. "I'm a driver like you. Or I was once. I didn't stop when I should have. I kept driving on the disconnected highway until I became part of it. Now I exist in the static, in the space between transmissions." I can see when the highway disconnects. I try to warn drivers. Lauren felt tears on her cheeks. Silence for a long moment, then, I don't know anymore. Time doesn't work right here. Could be years, could be decades. I remember starting a drive from Phoenix to El Paso. I remember a voice telling me to stop. I remember ignoring it. Everything after that is fragments, loops, endless highway under permanent night. I don't want that for anyone else. The gray-haired driver, whose name was Michael, joined Lauren in her truck. They sat together in the cab, keeping each other awake, monitoring their radios. The static voice occasionally broke through with updates. 2 hours until sunrise. 1 hour, 30 minutes. Michael told Lauren about his 3 days in the loop. The growing desperation, the surreal horror of an endless night, the terrible suspicion that he'd died and this was his eternity. At 6:47 a.m., the sun finally rose over the Arizona desert. Lauren and Michael watched it through their windshields like it was the most beautiful thing they'd ever seen. The static voice came through one last time. You're safe now. The highway is reconnected. You can drive to El Paso. You'll arrive normally. But remember this. Remember that the road sometimes disconnects. Remember that warnings should be heeded. Lauren asked, her voice breaking. Static pulsed for several seconds, then barely audible. Cooper. Douglas Cooper. I started my last drive on March 15, 2003. The radio went silent. Normal dispatch traffic returned to the company channel. Lauren and Michael drove to El Paso together, staying in contact via CB radio the entire way. Both arrived safely, delivered their cargo, filed their reports. Neither mentioned the static voice in their official accounts, knowing how it would sound. But Lauren began researching. She found articles about Douglas Cooper, a truck driver who disappeared in 2003 while driving from Phoenix to El Paso. His truck was never found. He was declared legally dead in 2010. Lauren still drives for the pharmaceutical company, still runs the Phoenix to El Paso route. But now she listens to her radio differently. When static patterns form words, when voices break through that shouldn't exist, she pays attention. She stops when warned. She's heard Douglas Cooper's voice 3 more times over the past few years, always warning of disconnections, always trying to save drivers from his fate. Each time, Lauren stops and waits for sunrise, and each time, she arrives safely at her destination. She wonders how many drivers hear the static voice and ignore it, how many slip into those disconnected stretches of highway and never return. She wonders if Douglas Cooper will ever escape, or if he's permanently caught in that space between transmissions, doomed to loop forever while trying to prevent others from joining him. Lauren has started keeping a memorial in her truck, a printed photo of Douglas Cooper from a missing person poster. It sits on her dashboard, a reminder that some warnings come from those who learn too late, and that the price of ignoring those warnings might be an eternity of endless highway under a sun that never rises. Marcus Webb had been hauling livestock across the Midwest for 26 years, specializing in the transport of cattle and horses between ranches and agricultural centers. His truck was customized for animal welfare, with ventilation systems, water feeders, and monitoring equipment to ensure his cargo's safety and comfort. Marcus took pride in his perfect record: 0 livestock losses, 0 accidents, 0 violations. On the night of September 9, 2016, Marcus drove into fog that wasn't made of water vapor, and his perfect record was replaced by something he can never report on any logbook. Marcus was transporting 20 head of cattle from a ranch outside of Lincoln, Nebraska, to a feedlot near Des Moines, Iowa, a straightforward 3-hour drive on I-80. He'd made the run dozens of times. The cattle were calm, the truck running smoothly, and Marcus was in good spirits when he left Lincoln at 9 p.m. Weather reports indicated clear conditions with good visibility. Marcus anticipated an easy night. About 40 miles east of Lincoln, near the tiny town of Greenwood, Marcus drove into fog. It appeared suddenly without the gradual thickening that usually precedes dense fog banks. One moment the road was clear, the next moment Marcus could barely see 10 feet ahead. He slowed to 40 miles per hour, turned on his fog lights, and settled in for cautious driving. Standard procedure for unexpected weather. Within minutes, Marcus noticed something odd about the fog. It moved wrong. Instead of drifting naturally with wind currents, it seemed to flow toward his truck in deliberate patterns, as if drawn by his movement. Marcus watched the fog press against his windshield, creating swirls and patterns that almost looked intentional. He rubbed his eyes, assuming exhaustion was making him see things. But no, the patterns persisted, forming and reforming in ways that natural fog shouldn't. Then Marcus saw the first face. It appeared in the fog directly in front of his windshield, emerging from the swirling vapor like a photograph developing. A human face, elongated and distorted, with hollow eyes and a gaping mouth. Marcus's heart jumped. He blinked hard and the face disappeared, dissolving back into formless fog. Jesus, Marcus muttered, gripping the wheel tighter. More faces appeared, dozens of them forming in the fog all around his truck, pressed against his windshield, his side windows, visible in his mirrors, men, women, children, all with that same distorted, hollow appearance. Their mouths moved as if speaking, but Marcus heard nothing except his engine and the road noise. The faces flowed past as he drove, appearing and dissolving in an endless stream. Marcus's cattle began making noise, not the normal sounds of animals shifting position during transport, but distressed lowing and stamping. Marcus checked his livestock monitoring system. His cargo camera showed the cattle pressed together, all facing the same direction, toward the rear of the trailer. Their eyes were wide, showing whites, a clear sign of fear. Marcus had transported cattle for over 2 decades and never seen them react like this. The faces in the fog grew more distinct, more detailed. Marcus could see expressions now: terror, agony, desperation. The mouths formed silent screams. Hands began appearing too, pressed against his windows as if the faces were connected to bodies, as if people were surrounding his truck, trapped in the fog, trying to get his attention. Marcus's breath came in short gasps. He wanted to stop, to flee the truck, to escape this nightmare, but some deep instinct told him that stopping would be worse. His CB radio emitted a sound unlike anything Marcus had heard before. Not static, not voices, but a low, rhythmic moaning like wind through a tunnel or the collective sighs of hundreds of people. The sound seemed to synchronize with the moving faces, as if the faces were trying to speak through the radio, trying to communicate through the only medium available. Marcus pressed his accelerator down, pushing his truck to 60 miles per hour, faster than was safe in such limited visibility. He didn't care. He needed out of this fog, away from these faces, back into normal reality where fog was just water vapor and faces stayed attached to bodies on solid ground. The faces kept pace with him, flowing alongside his truck, matching his speed exactly. Then one face did something different. Instead of dissolving like the others, it solidified. Pressed against his driver's side window, the face became three-dimensional, pushing into the cab as if the glass were permeable. Marcus saw details he wished he could unsee. The face belonged to a middle-aged woman, her features twisted in anguish, her skin pale and translucent. She mouthed words at him, and somehow, despite no sound penetrating his cab, Marcus understood her. "Join us. Stay with us." Marcus screamed, batting at the window as if he could push the face away. His hand passed through empty air. The window was solid, unchanged, but the face was inside now, partially manifested within the cab. More faces began pushing through. An old man, a teenage boy, a young woman holding what might have been a baby, though the small form was too indistinct to confirm. They filled Marcus's peripheral vision, crowding the cab, all mouthing the same words. "Join us. Stay with us." In the cargo trailer, his cattle went berserk. The monitoring camera showed them slamming against the trailer walls, desperate to escape. Marcus feared they'd injure themselves, but he couldn't stop. Not here. Not in this impossible fog filled with faces that shouldn't exist. He grabbed his cell phone to call 911, to call dispatch, to call anyone. The phone showed no signal, but the screen displayed a message that Marcus hadn't typed. "We were drivers too. We stopped in the fog." Marcus's blood froze. He looked at the faces surrounding him with new horror. These were drivers? People who'd encountered this same fog and failed to escape? The woman's face pressed closer, her translucent features inches from Marcus's cheek. He could see through her, could see the road and fog beyond her, could see other faces layered behind her. She opened her mouth impossibly wide, and fog poured out, filling the cab with cold, damp vapor. Marcus's hands began to fade. He looked down in terror to see his fingers becoming translucent, taking on the same pale, foggy quality as the faces around him. He was becoming part of the fog, transforming into whatever these entities were. Marcus shouted. He cranked his window down, letting the fog outside pour in, somehow hoping that bringing in more fog would dilute the transformation. Cold air rushed into the cab and the faces recoiled slightly, as if the movement of air disrupted them. That gave Marcus an idea. He turned his climate control to maximum, directing all air vents toward himself, creating turbulent airflow in the cab. The faces wavered, their forms becoming less stable in the moving air. Marcus's hands solidified again, the translucence fading. He kept the air moving, one hand on the wheel, the other adjusting vents and fan speeds, maintaining the turbulence that seemed to protect him from transformation. The CB radio moaning changed pitch, becoming higher, more desperate. The faces outside the truck multiplied, now numbering in the hundreds, all pressing against his vehicle, all trying to reach him. But inside the cab, the moving air kept them at bay, prevented them from solidifying enough to touch him. Marcus drove on, maintaining speed, maintaining airflow, fighting off the fog faces through simple circulation. After 20 minutes that felt like hours, Marcus saw something ahead. A faint glow, different from his headlights reflecting back from the fog. As he got closer, the glow resolved into the lights of a truck stop. Not just any truck stop, but one Marcus knew well. A 24-hour facility near Omaha that he'd stopped at dozens of times. He aimed for it like a beacon, praying it was real and not some mirage created by the fog. His truck burst out of the fog suddenly, like breaking through a surface. One moment he was engulfed, the next he was driving through clear night air toward the brightly lit truck stop. Marcus pulled into the parking lot, slammed on his brakes, and jumped out of his cab. He stood in the open air, breathing hard, looking back at the fog bank that had released him. It sat on I-80 like a wall, a clearly defined boundary between normal space and whatever hell existed within it. Other drivers were in the parking lot, standing outside their trucks, all staring at the fog. An older driver approached Marcus. He asked, pointing at the fog bank. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. "You're the third driver to make it out tonight. 5 went in that we know of. 2 haven't come out. You see anything in there?" Marcus met the man's eyes and saw knowledge there, saw shared trauma. "Faces," Marcus managed to say. The older driver nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's the fog of faces. Shows up on I-80 every few years. Usually near Greenwood. Nobody knows what it is or why it happens, but drivers who go in either come out traumatized or don't come out at all. Those who don't come out, we think they become part of it, part of the fog. He looked at Marcus's truck, at the cattle moving restlessly in the trailer. Marcus checked. His cattle had calmed down, but were clearly stressed. None appeared injured, though several would likely have bruising from their panic. He'd have to report the stress event, but could honestly attribute it to weather conditions. The fog was real enough, even if the faces within it weren't supposed to exist. Marcus completed his delivery to Des Moines in a state of shock, driving wide loops around that stretch of I-80, taking alternate routes that added an hour to his trip. Marcus never drove through Greenwood, Nebraska at night again. He adjusted all his routes to avoid that area after dark. He researched the location and found vague references in trucker forums to strange fog, to unexplained disappearances, to drivers who'd encountered something near Greenwood and refused to speak about it afterward. He found a news article from 1982 about a truck driver who'd vanished on I-80 near Greenwood during unusually dense fog. The driver's truck was found abandoned, engine running, no sign of the driver. That same pattern repeated over the years. Different decades, different drivers, same location, same fog. Marcus sold his truck in 2018 and retired from long-haul driving. He works at a livestock auction now, a job that keeps him stationary, keeps him away from highways and weather and things that shouldn't exist. But he has nightmares about the fog. In his dreams, he's back in his truck, surrounded by faces, and this time the airflow fails. This time his hands fade completely. This time he becomes fog, becomes one of the faces pressing against other drivers' windows, mouthing the words, "Join us, stay with us." He wakes from these dreams gasping, checking his hands in the darkness, confirming their solidity. Sometimes when morning fog settles over his property, Marcus sees faces in it. Brief glimpses, quickly dismissed but present nonetheless. He wonders if the fog of faces is growing, spreading, appearing in new locations. He wonders if one day it will find him again, even here miles from any highway, and finish the transformation it started. He wonders if the faces he saw were warning him or recruiting him, and whether there's truly any difference between the two. Story 9. The Way Station That Moves. Kevin Ortega had been hauling construction equipment across the western states for 14 years, running oversized loads that required special permits, careful route planning, and mandatory stops at way stations to verify permits and load security. Kevin knew every way station on his regular routes, their locations, their usual wait times, their staff. On April 4th, 2018, Kevin stopped at a way station that appeared on his route exactly where it should be, except it had never existed before and wouldn't exist again. And the people working there were measuring something other than weight. Kevin was hauling an excavator from Sacramento to Las Vegas, a route that took him down Highway 99 to Bakersfield, then east on Highway 58 and eventually connecting to I-15. The load was massive, requiring wide load permits and escort vehicles for certain sections. Kevin had made this run 24 times, knew every turn, every bridge clearance, every way station. At 2 a.m., approaching the town of Mojave, California, Kevin saw the familiar blue sign indicating a way station ahead. This particular way station was one Kevin used frequently. It sat on Highway 58 eastbound, usually staffed even during night hours due to the heavy commercial traffic heading to and from Las Vegas. Kevin slowed his rig, activated his turn signal, and took the exit ramp to the way station. As he approached the scale platform, he noticed the building looked different. The usual California Department of Transportation structure had been replaced by something older, built from dark brick instead of modern concrete and glass. Kevin stopped on the scale platform as required. Usually, the green light would illuminate almost immediately, indicating his permits were verified electronically and he could proceed. Instead, a red light flashed and a speaker crackled to life. Kevin frowned. Secondary screening was unusual for permitted oversized loads. His paperwork was in order, his load properly secured, but he followed instructions, driving slowly to the indicated parking area. A man in a uniform emerged from the brick building. The uniform was wrong, not the standard California DOT outfit Kevin was used to, but something older, more formal, like highway patrol uniforms from the 1950s or 60s. The man carried a clipboard and approached Kevin's driver's side window with a neutral expression. "Good evening, sir. Routine inspection." The uniformed man walked around Kevin's truck and trailer, making notes on his clipboard. He didn't appear to be checking the usual things: tire condition, strap tension, permit compliance. Instead, he seemed to be examining Kevin's rig from strange angles, looking underneath the trailer with a flashlight, inspecting the excavator's surfaces with unusual intensity. After several minutes, the man returned to Kevin's window. "Sir, we need to verify your load weight on our calibration scale. It's located in the rear inspection bay." The man pointed to a series of reflective arrows leading toward the back of the weigh station complex. Kevin had never seen a rear inspection bay at this location, but he complied. He restarted his engine and followed the arrows, driving behind the brick building into an area that seemed too large, too extensive for the property as Kevin remembered it. The calibration scale was inside a large garage bay, brightly lit by fluorescent lights that hummed with an odd, pulsing rhythm. Kevin drove onto the scale platform as directed. Through his mirrors, he saw the uniformed man operating controls, but instead of displaying a weight measurement, the digital readout showed numbers that made no sense, not weights in pounds or kilograms, but other numbers. Coordinates, timestamps, sequences that looked like code. The man approached Kevin's window again. "Sir, we're getting anomalous readings. Have you been experiencing any unusual phenomena during this trip?" Kevin stared at him. "What? No, I've been driving from Sacramento." The man made a note on his clipboard. "Interesting. Your load is showing significant chronological displacement." Kevin's confusion turned to unease. "I don't understand what you're talking about. I need to get this load to Las Vegas." The uniformed man looked up from his clipboard with eyes that reflected the fluorescent light in an odd, almost metallic way. "You can go, but you need to understand what you're carrying. That excavator was involved in a fatal accident in Las Vegas 3 days from now. 4 people will die. You're currently transporting it to the location where that will happen. We're weigh station 47. We don't measure weight, we measure probability, causality." Kevin's mouth went dry. "This is insane." The man smiled thinly. "Time doesn't travel, it flows. Sometimes the flow creates eddies, loops, places where cause and effect become unstable. Your load is caught in one of those eddies. It exists here now, but it also exists 3 days from now at the accident site. It's in both places simultaneously, and we measure that. We measure the stress that creates." Kevin reached for his cell phone to call dispatch to report this bizarre situation. The phone wouldn't turn on. He tried the ignition. His truck wouldn't start. The uniformed man shook his head. "You can't leave until we finish the inspection. We need to determine if intervening will stabilize or destabilize the temporal flow. Preventing the accident might create worse outcomes. Allowing it might be necessary." 2 more uniformed figures emerged from the brick building. A woman and another man, both wearing the same anachronistic uniforms, both carrying equipment Kevin didn't recognize. They approached the excavator, scanning it with devices that emitted blue light. They conferred in low voices, checked readouts, made calculations on tablets that seemed too advanced for the retro uniforms and building. The woman approached Kevin's window. "Mr. Ortega, we've determined that intervention is necessary. The accident 3 days from now will not only kill 4 people, but will also create a temporal anchor that causes a loop. The same accident will repeat every 3 days in an infinite cycle. killing the same 4 people over and over. Kevin's mind reeled. "How do you know my name?" The woman's expression was sympathetic. "We exist at Way Station 47. We're outside the normal flow. We see the highways through time, see the accidents before and after they happen. See the loops and tangles that form when causality becomes stressed. We've been monitoring this particular incident for what you'd call 6 months, though for us it's simultaneous. We see all 6 months at once." The uniformed workers attached devices to Kevin's excavator. Small metallic boxes that adhered to the excavator's surface, connected by thin cables. The woman explained as they worked. "These are probability anchors. They'll stabilize your load in this timeline, prevent it from existing in multiple time frames. The accident will still occur, but not with your excavator. A different piece of equipment will be involved, one not caught in the causal loop." Kevin felt sick. The woman nodded. "Death is a fixed point in this instance. What we're preventing is infinite repetition of that death." The male worker finished attaching the devices and signaled to someone in the inspection bay. A pulse of energy ran through the cables, making Kevin's hair stand on end. The excavator on his trailer briefly flickered as if it were a hologram, losing stability, then solidified again. "You're done," the first uniformed man said. "You can proceed to Las Vegas. You'll arrive normally, deliver your load, never see us again. But you needed to stop here. You needed to be part of stabilizing this timeline. That's what Way Station 47 does." Kevin's truck suddenly started on its own. The digital display on the scale returned to showing normal weight measurements, 79,400 pounds within legal limits for his permits. Kevin drove out of the inspection bay, following different arrows that led him back to the Way Station exit. As he merged back onto Highway 58, he looked in his mirrors. The Way Station was gone, not just dark or closed, but completely absent. The land where it should have been was empty desert, no building, no scale, no lighting. Kevin pulled over immediately and checked his GPS, checked his maps. There was no way station at that location. There never had been. Kevin called his dispatcher, tried to explain what had happened. Dispatch had no record of Kevin stopping. According to his electronic logging device, he'd driven straight through that section of Highway 58 without pausing. His GPS track showed continuous movement with no stop. Yet Kevin clearly remembered the 20 minutes he'd spent at Way Station 47. The uniformed workers, the probability anchors attached to his excavator. Kevin completed his delivery to Las Vegas. The excavator was unloaded at the construction site without incident. Kevin stayed in Las Vegas an extra day, unable to shake the feeling that he was waiting for something. 3 days after his delivery, he heard about an accident at the construction site. A different excavator, one delivered by a different driver, had malfunctioned. Its boom had collapsed during operation. 4 workers were killed. Kevin read the news report with tears streaming down his face. He returned to the construction site, asked to see the excavator he'd delivered. It sat idle, undamaged, the small metallic boxes still attached to its surface. Site workers told Kevin they'd tried to remove the boxes, assuming they were shipping sensors, but they wouldn't detach. Eventually, they stopped trying. The boxes were still there, still connected by thin cables, still doing whatever they'd been designed to do. Kevin quit hauling construction equipment shortly after. He couldn't shake the knowledge that he'd been part of something impossible, that he'd stopped at a place that didn't exist, that he'd carried a load that existed in multiple times simultaneously. He took a job driving local delivery trucks, short routes, no oversized loads, no way stations. But sometimes late at night he dreams about Highway 58. In those dreams he sees a brick building where no building should be, sees uniformed figures who measure things other than weight, sees scales that display probabilities instead of pounds. Kevin researches weigh stations now, an obsessive hobby. He's found references to other drivers experiencing strange secondary inspections, to weigh stations that appear in locations where none officially exist, to uniformed workers who ask impossible questions and use unexplainable equipment. He's found patterns suggesting there are multiple stations like 47 scattered across the highway system, monitoring causality, adjusting probability, preventing loops. He wonders if these stations have always existed, hidden in plain sight, or if they're recent additions, responses to some breakdown in the normal flow of time. Most of all, Kevin thinks about those 4 workers who died. He knows their names now, has researched their lives, attended one of their funerals from a distance. He carries their obituaries in his wallet, a reminder that he was part of something that chose their deaths, that weighted probabilities and decided their timeline. The knowledge is crushing. Kevin drinks more than he should, sleeps less than he needs, and avoids Highway 58 entirely. He's terrified that one night he'll see those blue weigh station signs again, that he'll be pulled into Station 47 for another adjustment, another impossible choice between tragedies. He hopes he never sees that brick building again, but he suspects that hope doesn't matter. Station 47 measures probability, and if Kevin's probability intersects with their measurements again, he'll stop there whether he wants to or not, because some scales weigh more than physical mass. They weigh fate itself. Story 10, The Final Exit. Patricia Trish Hammond was a third-generation trucker, carrying on a family tradition that stretched back to her grandfather who'd hauled freight in the 1960s. She'd been driving professionally for 29 years. Was known throughout the industry as reliable and fearless, willing to take routes and loads other drivers avoided. In 3 decades behind the wheel, Trish thought she'd seen everything the road could offer. On November 3, 2015, Trish discovered there was one more thing the highway wanted to show her. The exit every driver eventually takes, whether they're ready or not. Trish was hauling a final load before retirement, a symbolic run from her home base in Memphis to her daughter's home in Portland, Oregon. The trailer was half empty, filled with Trish's belongings, furniture, and possessions. She was moving west to start her retirement. She'd planned the route carefully, a farewell tour across America, stopping at places that had been significant during her career. She'd driven for 30 hours over 2 days, was approaching the final leg through Idaho on I-84. At 11:47 p.m., somewhere between Twin Falls and Boise, Trish saw an exit sign she'd never noticed before. Trish had driven I-84 dozens of times and didn't remember an exit 228 in this location. She checked her GPS. It showed no exit for another 37 miles. But there was the sign, clearly visible in her headlights, with a ramp leading off into darkness. Trish felt an overwhelming compulsion to take the exit. Not curiosity or need, but something deeper. An absolute certainty that she was supposed to leave the interstate at this point. She'd learned over 3 decades to trust her instincts. She activated her turn signal and took the exit, her truck descending the ramp into darkness that seemed thicker than normal night. Her headlights barely penetrated it, creating useless cones of reflected black. The exit ramp continued much longer than normal, curving gently, descending gradually. Trish checked her odometer. She'd traveled 3 miles on the ramp, impossible for a standard interstate exit. The darkness outside her windows was absolute, showing no landscape, no stars, nothing but black. Trish's radio went silent. Her GPS screen showed only static and her cell phone displayed no service, despite having shown full bars moments before. The ramp finally ended at a truck stop, fully lit and appearing completely normal. Trish could see other semis parked in rows, a well-lit building with restaurant and convenience store, fuel islands with prices that seemed reasonable. She pulled into the parking area, her unease fighting with relief at finding something familiar in the strange darkness. She parked between two other trucks and shut down her engine. The silence was profound, no highway noise from I-84, which should have been audible in the distance. No idling engines from other trucks, though several showed signs of occupation with curtains drawn in their sleeper berths. No wind, no insects, no ambient sound at all. Trish sat in her cab, suddenly reluctant to get out. Something about the truck stop felt wrong despite its normal appearance. A figure approached from the building, walking with purpose toward Trish's truck. An older woman, maybe 70, wearing a truck stop uniform that looked decades out of date. She smiled up at Trish's window with a friendly expression. "Welcome to the final exit." Trish rolled down her window. The older woman's smile widened. "For the choice. That's what this place is, the last truck stop before the end." Trish climbed down from her cab, her body stiff from long hours of driving. The older woman gestured toward the building. "Come inside, there are others waiting." Trish followed, her trucker's instinct screaming warnings that she ignored. Inside the truck stop, the fluorescent lighting was harsh and bright, showing a space that looked like every other truck stop Trish had ever visited. Aisles of snacks and supplies, coffee station, a few tables with chairs. Sitting at those tables were other drivers. Trish counted 12 of them, ranging in age from late 20s to elderly. Some wore modern clothes, others outfits from previous decades. All had the same expression, exhausted recognition, the look of people who'd been driving too long and had finally stopped. The older woman who'd greeted Trish addressed the group. "We're all here now. 13 drivers at the final exit tonight." One of the drivers, a middle-aged man with gray stubble, spoke up. "I don't understand. I was driving to Denver. I saw the exit sign. I took it." The older woman's expression became compassionate. "You're at the place between, the last truck stop before the final destination. Some of you are here because your journeys have ended. Accident, illness, heart attack. You died on the highway and this is where your consciousness stopped before moving on. Others are here because you've driven so long, so far, that you've worn thin the boundary between life and death. You're not dead yet, but you're close." Trish's blood went cold. She thought about the last 2 days of driving. The fatigue she'd pushed through, the chest pains she'd ignored, attributing them to indigestion. The blurred vision she'd dismissed as exhaustion. She asked, her voice barely a whisper. The older woman nodded. "Your heart is failing. You're having a cardiac event right now, this very moment, out on I-84. Your truck has drifted to the shoulder. Other drivers are stopping, calling for help, but you're not there anymore." The woman walked to the truck stop's window and gestured outside. "You can stay here with the others who've stopped. You can let go. It's peaceful here. No more driving. No more deadlines. No more fatigue. Just rest. Permanent rest. Or you can fight your way back. You can choose to return to your body on that highway shoulder. To survive the cardiac event. To reach your daughter in Portland. But returning means pain. Means surgery, recovery, limitations. Your driving days will be over either way. Here, you end as a driver." Trish looked at the other drivers. Some nodded, accepting, ready to stay at the final exit. Others looked confused, frightened, unwilling to believe this was happening. A young driver, maybe 30, stood up. "I want to go back. I have a wife, kids." The older woman smiled sadly. "Then go. Walk out the door, get in your truck, and drive back up the exit ramp. If your will is strong enough, you'll wake up in your body, but hurry." The young driver ran from the building. Trish watched him jump into his truck, start the engine, and drive toward the exit ramp. His taillights disappeared into the darkness, and Trish felt a surge of hope. Then she noticed something. The young driver's truck was still parked where it had been. 2 versions of the same truck, one driven by the departing man, one still sitting in the parking space. The older woman noticed Trish's observation. "He made it back. His body version is waking up now on some highway, paramedics around him. His heart restarted. His truck stop version has dissolved. Trish thought about her daughter waiting in Portland, about her grandchildren she'd promised to spend more time with during retirement, about the life she'd planned after 30 years of highway driving. Then she thought about the freedom of letting go, of stopping after so many miles, of finally being done. She was 62 years old, had driven nearly 3 million miles, had given everything to the road. Maybe the final exit was exactly where she was supposed to stop. Trish asked. 5 minutes, the older woman answered. Then your window closes and the choice is made for you. Trish walked to the window and looked at her own truck, her Kenworth T680, her home for the last 7 years, sitting quiet and still. She thought about all the places that truck had taken her, all the loads delivered, all the miles accumulated. Then Trish made her decision. She turned to the older woman. The woman shook her head. No, your heart is too damaged. You'll recover, but you'll never be cleared medically for commercial driving again. Trish nodded slowly. Then I want to end as a driver. I don't want to live watching others do what I can't. The older woman's expression shifted to something like respect. That's a choice many make, to end at their peak rather than decline into something else. Trish looked at the other drivers who'd made the same choice, who sat peacefully at their tables, content with their decision to stay at the final exit. She recognized the look on their faces. It was the look of drivers who'd completed their final run. I'm certain, Trish said. The moment she spoke, she felt something shift. The truck stop faded at the edges, becoming translucent. The other drivers became transparent, ghostly. The older woman smiled one last time. Then rest, Patricia Hammond. Your journey is complete. You delivered your load. The final exit dissolved completely, and Trish found herself in her truck. Parked not in a truck stop lot, but in a space that felt like memory and dream simultaneously. On I-84 in Idaho, Trish Hammond's Kenworth sat on the shoulder, flashers blinking. Other drivers had stopped, had called for help, had pulled Trish from the cab and started CPR. Paramedics arrived and worked for 40 minutes, but Trish's heart had sustained too much damage. She was pronounced dead at the scene, her final run ending 17 miles short of the Idaho-Oregon border. Trish's daughter received her mother's belongings from the truck, found journals documenting 30 years of highway life. In one of the final entries, dated the morning before Trish's death, there was a strange note. Dreamed last night about a place called the Final Exit, a truck stop that isn't real but is more real than any other place. The daughter didn't understand the entry but kept the journal, reading through it sometimes, piecing together her mother's life on the road. Other drivers report seeing Trish sometimes late at night on I-84 in Idaho. A ghost truck matching her description, driving the shoulder, flashers blinking as if still looking for help that arrived too late. Some drivers say if you pull over and approach the ghost truck, you'll see Trish sitting in the driver's seat, looking peaceful, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. She doesn't acknowledge anyone who approaches. She's already at the final exit, some say, already moved beyond this world, but her truck remains, a marker of where a driver ended her journey. The final exit has been reported by other drivers too, always at different locations, always appearing when a driver is close to death. Exit 228 with its simple white sign, the long ramp descending into darkness, the two normal truck stop where impossible choices are offered. Drivers who've approached the exit but pulled back at the last moment report seeing trucks parked there, dozens of them. Semis from every era, all sitting silent and still, their drivers having made the choice to stay. Those drivers report feeling an overwhelming sadness mixed with peace emanating from the place. As if the final exit holds both the grief of ended journeys and the relief of finally stopping. No one knows who the older woman is, the one who greets drivers and explains their choice. Some say she's death herself, taking a form familiar to truckers. Others claim she's the spirit of the first truck driver who died behind the wheel, now serving as a guide for others. A few believe she's something else entirely, a manifestation of the highway itself, the road made conscious and compassionate, offering its travelers one last moment of agency before the end. The final exit exists in the stories drivers tell each other, in the warnings shared over CB radios, and in truck stop conversations. It's become part of trucker mythology, a modern legend that carries the weight of truth even for those who've never seen it. Because every driver knows that eventually, the journey ends. Eventually, there's a final exit, a last truck stop, a moment when the engine shuts down for the last time. And in that moment, the choice Trish faced becomes everyone's choice. Fight to continue in diminished form or accept completion and rest. The final exit waits for everyone. The only question is whether you'll recognize it when the sign appears in your headlights, and whether you'll have the courage to take the ramp into darkness, trusting that whatever waits there is kinder than the alternative. Trish Hammond made her choice. She ended as a driver. And somewhere in the spaces between highways, in the truck stop that exists only for those who've reached the end, her Kenworth still sits parked, flashers blinking, a testament to 30 years on the road and the final decision to stop while she was still behind the wheel.